The world first took notice of Ethan Allen in the early 1770s, when he emerged as Colonel Commandant of the Green Mountain Boys, a self-constituted militia whose main purpose was keeping New York claimants out of the New Hampshire grants, the disputed land west of the Connecticut River that became Vermont, where Allen and his brothers just happened to be major homeowners. In May 1775, he and his merry band, joined by Benedict Arnold, seized Fort Ticonderoga, New York, and its valuable military stores, arguably the first premeditated act of colonial aggression against the crown. Emboldened by this coup, he then talked both the Continental Congress and the New York Provincial Congress into backing an invasion of Canada. At the end of September, in a foolhardy attempt to capture Montreal ahead of the main American force commanded by General Richard Montgomery, Allen and a few dozen followers were disarmed by redcoats on the outskirts of the city. "I will not execute you now," raged the British commandant, Brigadier General Robert Prescott, "but you shall grace the halter at Tyburn, God damn you." Tyburn was a historically significant area in London, known for its use as a primary execution site for centuries. Specifically, it was located in the Tyburn Gallows, where countless public hangings occurred. For the next several months, it definitely looked like Allen was on his way to Tyburn, as he would tell the story in his immensely popular Narrative of Colonel Ethan Allen's Captivity, written by himself. Prescott had him shackled in the hold of a British warship and instructed the guards to treat him with severity. Allen remained in irons for about 6 weeks, alternatively demanding more gentlemanlike usage, and challenged everyone in earshot to fight. Nobody took the bait because, as one of his captors observed, the American prisoner was a mere criminal, a remark that only infuriated Allen more. "I was obliged to throw out plenty of extravagant language," he conceded. When Montgomery's army drew near Montreal in late October, Allen and the other prisoners were sent downriver to Quebec. There, they were put aboard a dispatch ship and taken to England to be brought up on charges of treason and rebellion. The voyage took 40 days, which the Americans spent confined in a specifically constructed brig between the decks. "I should imagine," Allen recalled, "that it was not more than 20 feet one way and 22 the other. Into this place we all were, to the number of 34 thrust and handcuffed, 2 prisoners more being added to our number, and were provided with 2 excrement tubs. In this circumference we were obliged to eat and perform the offices of evacuation during the voyage to England. We were insulted by every blackguard sailor and Tory on board in the cruelest manner. In the consequence of the stench of the place, each of us soon followed with the diarrhea and fever, which occasioned intolerable thirst. When we asked for water, we were, most commonly, instead of obtaining it, insulted and derided. And, to add to all the horror of the place, it was so dark that we could not see each other, and were overspread with body lice." Surprisingly, Allen added, "not one of us died in the passage." Allen's recklessness won him scant sympathy in either the Army or Congress. But given the question on everybody's mind, were captured Americans going to be treated as rebels or as prisoners of war? The way the British had chosen to deal with him could not be ignored. Montgomery complained about it even before taking Montreal and threatened to retaliate. Washington had only recently protested to Gage about the suffering of Americans held in Boston in mid-December. He advised General William Howe, Gage's successor, that Allen has been treated without regard to decency, humanity, or the rules of war, that he has been thrown into irons and suffers all the hardships inflicted upon common felons. Under the law of retaliation, Washington warned, "Whatever happens to Allen, such exactly shall be the treatment and fate of Brigadier Prescott," who, by a delicious twist of fate, had become an American prisoner shortly after Montgomery's forces entered Montreal. As it happened, this uproar ensured that Allen would not end his days on the end of a rope, at Tyburn or anywhere else. Near the end of December 1775, he and his fellow captives arrived in Falmouth, and were marched off through throngs of curious bystanders to Pendennis Castle, where they soon found themselves locked up together in one common apartment. Knowing that the odd-makers in London were betting on his execution, and with the guards perpetually shaking the halter at him, I could not feel, but inwardly extremely anxious for my fate. He nonetheless resolved to behave in a daring, soldier-like manner, that I might be exhibit a good example of American fortitude. He learned only later that the prospect of retaliation against Prescott and other British prisoners had caused Germain and the king to wonder whether hanging the American was a good idea after all. The Duke of Richmond, John Wilkes, and other members of the pro-American opposition forced the government's hand by obtaining a writ of habeas corpus, meaning that Allen would have to be formally charged in an English court or released. Not wanting a trial as yet, but not wanting to let Allen go, the government hustled all the Americans out of Pendennis Castle and put them on ships headed back to America, safely beyond the reach of meddlesome judges. I find the last part particularly interesting, where he resolves to behave in a daring, soldier-like manner, that to exhibit a good sample of American fortitude. Do we have the same American fortitude they had? Are we able to think about others? Are we able to think about what our values and principles are, even when facing death? Ethan Allen wanted to ensure the authorities in England knew that Americans were different. Even in the moment before death, he would hold to a high standard of conduct.